All right, so everyone's here. Good to go. Today we're going to host, as I said, Trezor, who are one of the, if not the most popular Bitcoin wallet, to my knowledge, at least. I myself can say that I'm a user. I'm a power user. I also have the first one and the Model T, and I really like them. And I just today during my research for this event, I just now saw that they actually have a Bitcoin only firmware. So if you don't want your Trezor to have anything but Bitcoin, you can actually do it with a few simple clicks. It was very nice to watch. Now we're going to let you guys introduce yourselves. I think we're going to start with Yago, as usual, maybe for our new listeners. And after that, Pavol and the team, you can go.
Thanks very much. I'm Yago. I've been in Bitcoin for a long time now. I got into Bitcoin while I was trying to uh, s- work on machine learning systems for diagnostic networks, and by mistake I read the Satoshi white paper and it blew my mind, screwed up my life because I've been basically full-time Bitcoin ever since. I'm extremely interested in all of the ways that we can be self-sovereign. And I've been working on Sovryn, which is a platform that brings smart contracts in self-custody to trading, exchanging, lending, and basically any of the ways that you would want to put your Bitcoin to use from its early days, which wasn't that long ago, just over a year ago. I learned about the project from some friends of mine who are working on it, and have been working on Sovryn ever since. So that's me. I'm Yago.
Hi everyone, do you hear me?
Loud and clear. Hey, Pavol.
Great. So, hello everyone. My name is Pavol Rusnak and I'm co-founder of Satoshi Labs, the company who created Trezor. Uh, it's a company that I started with Slash, Marek Palatinus in 2013, but it was a couple of years before. It was end of 2011 when we were thinking about creating a hardware wallet that will make it easy for non-technical people to take custody of their own private keys, which was very hard at the time because, if you are using a regular computer with Windows or Mac OS, it's there are a lot of moving parts and it's easy to get a malware. So that's why we came up with that idea that hardware wallet is probably the best way how to isolate these private keys and other private data from potentially malicious environment that your computer is. And later we have grown up to the company of around 100 people, and we are doing a lot of development not only in the hardware wallet space where we are pioneers like you mentioned, but also we are investigating other options. We are looking into, for example, Lightning network integrations and how we can leverage that in our stack. And maybe we can talk later about what are our newest efforts in that area. And I have to say I'm really happy that it was possible for us to attract not only local but also global talent. That said, it's for us it's a priority to work with the whole Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole, and that's why we invented a lot of open standards, so all of these different implementations can work together and interoperate within each other. Yeah, I think that's about me. And if there are any questions that I didn't omit it from this introduction, then feel free to ask.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Joseph, and I have joined Trezor about 9 months ago, and I have followed Bitcoin several years before that. I authored a book on Bitcoin, but that's just in Czech. I contribute regularly to Bitcoin Magazine, to BTC Times, to Trezor blog, and my passion is simply exploring Bitcoin in all its various aspects, from economics to protocol development, stuff like Taproot, to security and privacy. That's why I love working for Trezor, and even sidechains and second layer solutions as well. So yeah, this is exciting to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, I guess I'm up now. So my name's Anthony. I'm working in the marketing team at Trezor. My background's mostly as a musician, but to pay my way through that, I was both dabbling in crypto and working part-time in PR. So when my musical dreams ended, I went to my next favorite thing, which is, of course, Bitcoin. So I'll be here contributing, I suppose. Pavol has a lot more to say about the technology, but I feel I have some thoughts on open economy, which I'd love to share. So thanks for having me.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. So with those quick introductions, I think we're gonna start, sorry. And I think whichever one of you who wants to take the lead here, Pavol maybe, and wants to tell us how the story of how Trezor came to be. I don't know, what were the first steps? Who initiated the idea? How was it like to start in the Bitcoin space in the early days, where there were not many companies doing what you guys have done previously? Maybe share us some of your experiences.
Sure. So I already indicated that the idea of a hardware wallet came up to our mind in around 2011. That was the time when I met Slash. He was already running the first Bitcoin mining pool called the Slash pool, and then we realized that it's very hard for regular people to take the security of their private keys into their hands, because it was very hard for them to make their computers secure. And of course, me and Slash, we were computer geeks, and we were able to install secure distribution of Linux on our laptops, which we inspected whether there are not some additional hardware components that shouldn't be there, But this was certainly not a possibility for everyone. And we realized that if we want Bitcoin to succeed, and if we want to succeed it in a fully self-sovereign way, we need to make it possible for people to take full custody of their private keys. And initially, we didn't want to create a hardware wallet. We were software developers, but we arrived at the conclusion that having a separate hardware just for the private keys and signing the transaction is probably the only way how to solve this issue. And it's a very simple formula. Like if you are running a laptop, it's very, very complex hardware, so many components, and then you are putting an operating system on top of it. And for example, Microsoft Windows has around 100 to 500 million lines of code, and same goes for macOS. So it's impossible to audit everything in the operating system that is doing what it's supposed to do. On the other hand, if you create a specialized hardware that is designed only for custody of the private keys and signing the transaction, you can create this hardware with very little components. Basically, if you tear down Trezor, you see there is just a microcontroller, display, buttons, USB port, and some analog components like resistors and capacitors, and that's it. So it's very easy to inspect. And also it is possible to review the full source code of Trezor, which is somewhere between maybe 100,000 and 200,000 lines of codes at the moment. And it is definitely possible to review in small team of people. So we created this concept and started to work on it. We created some proof of concept devices and integrations, and it turned out that it is viable to actually pull this off. And that's why we decided that we should start the company in 2013. And next year, 2014, we were able to deliver the first batch of devices to people who pre-ordered them in 2013. This is very important to say that we didn't take any venture capitalist money at the beginning. The whole project was self-funded, and we prefer it to stay that way because I think that if you take venture capitalist money, then these investors are your customers, and basically they might interfere with your vision. And it's very hard to stay truthful to your vision if there is such interference. And also it's very hard to do compromises when it comes to security. The solution either is secure or not. So, and that's why we over the years we had some offers to accept investments from investors and maybe some other VC groups, but we decided that we don't want to, in order to stay self-sovereign and to serve our users. And I think it really fits together because we want our users to be self-sovereign, but in order to fulfill this mission, we also have to stay sovereign. So, yeah. And then, so it was 2014. And then a couple of years later, it was 2018, we came up with the second generation of Trezor device called Trezor Model T. And we improved upon all the experience we had. So we made the display larger, we upgraded the USB port to the newer format, and also we discussed a lot what we can change when it comes to user experience and user interface on the device if we have more colors and more display estate. And I think we managed to create the hardware wallet, which is very, very easy to use, and that again comes from the idea that if you have a super safe or super secure solution, but if it's very hard to use, then you are compromising on security because people can shoot themselves in their feet. So we are struggling to find this balance between security and usability. And then recently, several years ago, we realized that it's very important to cover not only these two things, but also add privacy into the mix, because we see a lot of other wallets are not accounting for that. And we started to focus on privacy things. And we also, for example, added Tor integration into our software stack, so you can do transactions privately. And this is something where we want to focus more, explore options when it comes to privacy. So our ultimate mission right now is to make it possible for people to become self-sovereign. And we want to achieve that by providing a hardware wallet which really nicely combines the usability, security, and privacy side of things.
Yes,
That's
Yago,
super cool. I've been using Trezor for a number of years now, and I have to say it's my favorite hardware wallet. Um, and for me, I really can't imagine trying to secure or transact with Bitcoin without secure hardware. So, I think one of the things that I've always thought was very cool about the crypto industry that Bitcoin started is how it's created incentives that have never existed before to create um, the tools for people to be able to manage online security in a way which has never been previously available. And I'm interested where you guys see this going. But maybe, since we started with sort of how it evolved, I'm curious, y all of you guys started out, like a lot of us, um, with a deep focus on self-sovereignty and privacy, which led you to Bitcoin, which led you to building out these hardware systems. Um, and one of the conversations that we had recently was with the guys from Casa, and they said that one of the things they were seeing is that DeFi in particular had been a very powerful driver for people to want to have self-custody and to start seeing the value in self-custody rather than just holding funds on exchanges or third parties like that. And one of the things that they hoped to see is more of this come to Bitcoin so that more people would be driven to do that with Bitcoin as well. And I'm curious how things look from your guys' perspective and how you think about this.
Well, I think maybe Joseph and Anthony can answer this, because honestly, I'm so deep into technological aspects of things that I think there are probably better people to answer whether is there potential or in DeFi or not.
Yeah, so I believe people started to care about online security and computer security with Bitcoin. That's what basically Andras Antonopoulos pointed out like 5 years ago. And I believe this is quite true, because before people didn't use even password managers, and that was actually my case. I never used password managers before I came into Bitcoin, and I started to understand why strong passwords and two-factor authorization is actually a must. And similarly, that's how I and many people later discovered Trezor and the whole concept of hardware wallets, because suddenly you had something very valuable, something that's digital but scarce and valuable, and you have to protect it yourself. And the case with DeFi, I believe, is basically the same stuff, but with just a broader audience. I don't necessarily think DeFi as such is the driver for more security. It's more like DeFi is for the past, and has been for the past 2 years, the main attraction for the retail, for the newcomers. And they suddenly start having something valuable. Some of these tokens, at least for the short term, they are very valuable. So they naturally start to look for ways to protect it. And if they decide to leave exchanges, that's of course good. Yeah, it's basically the same stuff over again, like with the early crop of Bitcoiners that suddenly found out they need to protect something, because now you have something valuable and you have to protect it yourself. Otherwise, I'm quite skeptical about DeFi as such, but maybe this space will convince me otherwise. As I consider Sovryn as a little bit more honest project than what we see on Ethereum, for example.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on Joseph. I agree with him a lot, but I think DeFi itself is kind of pointless unless you have the infrastructure in place to secure it. You're talking about like 35, sometimes 3,000% yield over a year, and what's the point of that if you're not going to have the asset at the end of that 6-month staking period or whatever? And all of this technology that we see being experimented with in the DeFi space, I think it's evidenced through the amount of hacks and scams that it's just not being deployed at the time when it's going to be secure. So if these things are coming to Bitcoin, they have to come in at the same pace as all the other developments. And so I think that all this experimentation will slowly be adopted by Bitcoin, but not without some care and due diligence behind it.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Pavol, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one final thought. I think we should really be more careful about defining what we are talking about, because I have a feeling that DeFi, decentralized finance, is getting like overloaded term. So, for example, when we are talking about crypto, I'm not really sure whether we are talking about Bitcoin, Ethereum, ERC20 tokens, or are we talking about NFT? And same goes for DeFi. Like, are we talking about trustlessly swapping Bitcoin for stablecoins, or it's something about borrowing coins for stable coins? So I think there are definitely some use cases that make sense. For example, if you want to provide Bitcoin liquidity in your local area, and at the same time you don't want to expose yourself to risks related to exchange rate changes, then it totally makes sense for you to use stablecoins. And if stablecoins are part of DeFi, then this part of DeFi make total sense. But as Anthony said, there are a lot of projects that label themselves as DeFi, but actually they don't bring anything of value. So we have to really start to distinguish what we are talking about and what we are not talking about.
Right. I think, looking at finance and looking at crypto, and I think this is true for finance, like traditional finance, and it's true for crypto. You basically have two approaches. You have the get rich quick approach, and you have the grow and preserve wealth approach. And the much bigger market is growing and preserving wealth. It's what wealthy people by and large do, and it's also what most families want to do. And I think it also is the reason that Bitcoin is so popular. Right? Bitcoin is like is perceived within the crypto space as sort of the safe store of value, the conservative. If you're a conservative investor in crypto, you're in Bitcoin. And so I've started to differentiate a little bit, by trying to use the term DeFi, which I really liked the term. Decentralized finance I think is important, but it's you've kind of got like PonziFi, and then you've got SlowFi, and SlowFi I think is the thing that you guys are referring to, which is how can I borrow against my Bitcoin so that I don't ever have to sell it? How can I maybe buy more Bitcoin by using collateral that exists because I already have Bitcoin, because I'm all in on Bitcoin, but I still am bullish on Bitcoin? How do I earn some yield on my Bitcoin, maybe by lending it out, right? All of these things are basically ways that you put your Bitcoin to work. You can secure it. You can secure your future. You can use it to grow the wealth that you have while taking transparent risks that are manageable. as opposed to these very, very high APYs where it's very, very unclear what the risk is, but it's clear that there's a lot of risk and it's very, very difficult to manage that risk. So I think that they're actually, we've gotten to a point where there are very good, more conservative projects, like some of the earlier projects that have been developed in the Ethereum DeFi space, like Aave, have taken a fairly slow-fi approach, and they've also been very, very diligent about being secure with the technology that they built. And on the other hand, you have projects like Olympus, which, was designed to be attractive to trying to get rich quick, and other projects which, have launched without audits and have been hacked and lost huge amounts of funds. And so I think it's very important for us as, the Bitcoin community, if what we're trying to do is in line with what most people, I think, are interested in doing with their Bitcoin, which is securing their self-sovereignty and securing their financial independence, that we can build and place an emphasis on building, as fast as we can, but secure systems which are more transparent around the type of risks that they offer, and also which make it easier for people to have direct control. So, for example, one of the things that Sovryn has done is allow users not to have to download a Web3 wallet and install one, on their computer, but use Trezor directly to manage and sign transactions. So that you can reduce man-in-the-middle attacks, and potentially, if you're connecting over Tor, you could even use the Tor integration. And so I think taking the time and the care to do those things are very, very important. And they're all parts of DeFi. It's just a different approach to DeFi.
My 2 cents on this are the transparent risks that you brought up. Perhaps what's missing there is the fact that that when you talk about DeFi, you're adding more moving parts into the system. And with Bitcoin, you have already quite a solid foundation. But as soon as you start introducing things like smart contracts that are going to be locking up your coins and lending them out to other people, there's always going to be an extra chance of exploits. So my personal view on that is that that's a risk I don't want to take, because I already spent 5 years skeptical over whether Bitcoin was going to have an exploit and just fall apart. So secure systems, they're secure until they're not. So one update could come along and just the house of cards comes falling down. So that's my opinion.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So, there's always different levels of risk that you assume under different circumstances, right? And so when you are holding Bitcoin, right, yourself, you're taking certain risks by being responsible for your own funds, right? When you are using a well-known custodian, then you're taking a totally different set of risks. In fact, they may be holding the Bitcoin more securely. It's just not clear that they're holding the Bitcoin more securely for you in the long term, right? They may be holding it for someone else. If a government comes around and demands those funds. So different. There are always different trade-offs around risk. Now, the case today is we are, we've all been holding Bitcoin, some of us for longer, some of us for shorter periods of time. I'm in a position where the majority of my assets are in Bitcoin. And if I want to be able to use those assets, right, today I would really only have two choices. I would have to sell Bitcoin, which would mean going through an intermediary probably, or I would have to borrow against that Bitcoin, which would probably, if Sovryn didn't exist, mean going to a centralized provider. Neither of those things are appealing, right? And so if there's an opportunity for us to create a way for people to do that. The benchmark is not, is this as secure as just hodling Bitcoin on main chain? Because it's not, and of course never can be. I think the benchmark is this safer and more secure than doing this through a custodial party or the other alternatives that are out there?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense what you say, and I have to say I like the auditability aspect of things, like you said earlier, and this is something that's never been so transparent before. So that's something we should really take as a huge advantage of it. And what Anthony was talking about, the security of the moving parts that we are building on top of solid foundation, I think that this is also something that makes more sense to build on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is already a proven solid foundation, and when it comes to scripting possibilities on top of that, there are some really exciting improvements in the pipeline, and one of them is Miniscript, for example, where you can do some advanced scripting, and I'm looking at it with one eye, because there are so many other things that we need to do first, but this is something I'm really excited for, and I'll be watching that space to see what scripting options on top of Bitcoin we will have in the very near future. And because of how things are designed, I really believe this will be much more secure by design, because it's not like a full Turing complete machine. It's like a rather simple script evaluation machine, but still you can create much more complex scripts than what we are able to create right now on top of Bitcoin.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I would be really curious to see like this kind of DeFi utility, and as you mentioned, like the SlowFi in the layered manner on top of Bitcoin, because RSK is basically like the Turing complete smart contract capability, right? With the full attack surface that is possible on Ethereum, and we have seen many unexpected exploits of Ethereum DeFi. So how do you basically reconcile that? Because it seems to me like building on top of RSK is more comparable to building on top of Ethereum than Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I think from the perspective of the EVM, it's almost identical to building on Ethereum, and really the big differences come from the fact that it is secured by Bitcoin proof of work and that the native asset is Bitcoin. So I don't think that from the perspective of sort of like the code base, you're getting an advantage over what you could do on Ethereum. And so is that a problem? I would suggest that Solidity and EVM are, far from perfect. There's lots of reasons not to like them. However, they have two very big advantages. One is that a lot of people have made a lot of mistakes, which have exposed many of the risks. And as a result, there's been a huge amount of learning around what are the best practices to developing on the EVM, and specifically with Solidity. And then the second thing, which is tied to that, is a huge set of libraries which are well understood, well audited, a huge amount of frameworks and developer tools have been developed, as well as significant code bases. And so some of those have been used to create very, very well understood systems which have been thoroughly audited, and have been, working in the wild with what are effectively bug bounties, all of the funds that they hold, measuring in the many, many billions of dollars, and have held up effectively flawlessly. Now, what the approach that Sovryn has taken, the Sovryn devs have taken, is to take all of those advantages and basically treat Ethereum as a giant testnet in a way for what can be done on Bitcoin. A system where a huge number of experiments are done with massive bug bounties, and what survives you can look at and learn from and potentially even use. And so Sovryn has managed to relatively quickly build out a very, very large amount of functionality, like Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, borrowing, lending, trading, even margin trading. And we continue to audit every single line of code. We have a multi-step audit process. We have bug bounties. But even before we do any of that, we're typically using code and libraries that we already have a very, very high degree of confidence in. I think the practical result is that we are ending up with reliable, highly secure and transparent code. Not perfect. We'll never be able to say, there's no risks. But I think to the extent that we're able to, that it's possible to build secure code, it's possible to do that with Solidity, and I think that is what we and other projects, including projects on Ethereum, have done.
All right, thanks. Thanks for commenting on that.
So Yago, I'm going to let you lead it here from now, talk a bit more about building an open economy. I myself am interested. I know during the 90s there was a lot of promising and talk about decentralized protocols as well. And at the end of the day, after the dot-com bubble, a lot of these stuff just faded, and a lot of giant VC-backed multi-billion companies were created. So I guess I'm wondering, where does free open source software goes from here? Is the trend going to continue, or maybe we're going to see it go back, just like it happened before?
I don't think we are going back. Like, once the box has been opened, it's very hard to close it. And I really like that Satoshi had chosen open source license for Bitcoin, because he probably realized that's the only way how to spread the project to everybody, basically, with no limitations. And also the auditability of the solution is very, very important. So there is this mantra, don't trust, verify, which is very, very easy to achieve if your solution is open source. But if it's proprietary, then there is inherent trust required for your users to use your product or software or hardware. So I don't think we will see a movement to more proprietary software. What we are seeing right now, that some companies in the space have started to do a combination. So, for example, you are able to audit the source code, but you are not able to use it commercially. And I think this is mainly for protecting their work from being copied by another actor in the space. And it's I have a mixed feeling about that, because of course I would like things to be as open as possible, but on the other hand, I really do recognize this threat, especially if you are a small group of individuals that do not want to take external venture capitalist money, and then there is a group that is VC funded and they can basically take your work for free and build a commercial project out of that. This is something you need to be able to protect from. We see a lot of things like that happening in the cloud space, where Amazon is really famous for copying open source projects into their portfolio and providing that as a service, while the original authors of the open source projects, they are basically totally broke and they don't have enough resources to work on the original project anymore. So I think this is finding the balance between opening everything up and opening things up so you can still have some funding to keep continuing doing the open source is something where we will we as a society will try to figure out where the balance is. And the good thing is that the stuff we are building here, the open financial infrastructure, it can actually help with that. So, and I don't mean just by taking donations, because taking donations for open source project, it doesn't always work out, but maybe creating some other solutions, maybe using Lightning Network, so you can pay like continuous stream of really small amount of money for using the software, is maybe that will open these new opportunities and will make us make it possible to find this balance between opening everything up and having this semi-closed solution.
Pavol, I'd like to ask you about that. So one of my concerns with an aspect of Bitcoin culture today is, for example, Sovryn has a token, and one of the things that is very common for us to hear from some Bitcoiners is that no projects should have tokens. The only token should be Bitcoin, etc. It goes. A lot of it seems to be, and sort of anti-profit motive. People feel like open source and Bitcoin shouldn't be monetized. And we've seen this sort of anti-monetization or anti-profit approach being taken by Bitcoiners in other ways as well. So, for example, there was recently someone was offering a course for women in Bitcoin and was charging for it, and there was a drama around that. So I'm curious, so maybe before I get to the question, I'll just point out that, I think the purpose of token is to create the right set of incentives which can allow people to invest in and develop open source projects. And, you mentioned earlier what was needed, the thoughts that you guys had around outside funding for Trezor. I'm curious about your thoughts on tokenization as a way for us to promote the development of layer 2 systems specifically for Bitcoin, and to keep Bitcoin competitive by doing it.
Right. Maybe Joseph and Anthony can add something later, but I think that a lot of things went really wrong when it comes to tokens and the whole ICO craziness that happened at the end of 2017. There were a lot of scams involved, and I don't think that tokens by definition are bad. I mean, I already said that stablecoins have some uses. Also, if you want to fund your projects using the tokens, it's perfectly fine. but it really has to be, I mean, the token has to be created in a way that the intentions and incentives are really clear, because what happened in the ICO phase was that a lot of projects launched their ICO tokens, and then they just sold them for so ridiculous amount of money they didn't really have any motivation to work on the project. I don't want to give any examples, because I would probably mention a couple of them, but and forgot to mention some others. But I remember some projects that were trying to come up with some decentralized alternatives for something, and that something could have been either instant messenger or encryption software or whatever. And when I saw that this group of people, they raised $200 million, it was immediately obvious to me that they will never deliver the product, because they don't have the incentive to work on that anymore, because they are like filthy rich already. So and I think it's really tricky to launch your token in a way that you stay truthful to your original mission to deliver the project, and use token just as a vehicle for you to be able to deliver the project. And it can very easy to somehow derail, and now you just don't have any motivation to deliver the project, because you already fulfilled some other mission to get yourself filthy rich. So it's a design. It's a question of how the token is designed, and we should really be ourselves whether this token is designed in a way that enables people to deliver, or it's designed in a way that is to be able to do something else.
Yeah, so if I can comment on that as well, I largely agree with Pavol, as the tokens offer or come with incentives to just print money out of nothing for the team. So one of the major concerns is who actually controls the token emission from the start and in the like subsequent periods. And mostly what kind of rights and liabilities are attached to the token, because usually tokens aren't equities, even though they are presented that way and have been presented that way in ICO bubble. And it's like it falls into this gray area where it's not really an equity, it's not a bond, it's not like an internet money like Bitcoin is, and the teams usually exploit that gray area to just hype it up, sell it to naive users, and doesn't really work like that. Like maybe there is one good token model that I'm aware of, and that's BISC, the decentralized exchange. They have their own token, and it seems to work quite fine. Other than that, I'm not really aware if there is working like a governance token. I was quite disappointed actually with Uniswap and Compound, especially Uniswap, because it was presented at first as like a tokenless alternative to Bancor, and then they just introduced the token as well, which seemed like just printing money out of nothing. So yeah, I'm also quite skeptical about tokens, but happy to learn about solid tokenomics if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I just want to chip in as well. We're coming across very bearish on. I just wanted to get to this one article that Jack shared recently about Jack Dorsey shared by Faiz Khan, which was called "You Don't Own Web3," and I think that's whereas Pavol was talking about the let's say the winter of 2018 being caused by all of this token emission. Now you're seeing the same thing happen with the Web3, and you're seeing it being bought out by venture capitalists, i.e. A16Z, in cooperation with an exchange to sell it on to retail investors. And at that point, there are just so many thousands of tokens that you have to be suspicious of, because you know that these things are going on behind the scenes, whether it's by VCs or by the team itself. So it's not that tokens are inherently bad, like Joseph says. It's just that they it's very hard for them to prove themselves. And at the moment, there aren't many examples. I can't think of a single one at the moment that would that seems like the right way to go. So that's my opinion. It's a great article. If you haven't read it, I would really recommend taking the time to go through it.
I think if I know which one you're referring to, I did read it, and I think it was a fantastic article. Is it the one where he analyzes the results of tokens that list on Coinbase?
Exactly, yeah. And the returns if you'd invested in, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum instead, which speaks for itself.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. It's true that the majority of token incentive systems are very incompatible with good results, both for the protocols that they are used with and for the users and for the people who acquire those tokens, right? So if you think about Uniswap, for example, there's no real connection between the incentives of the protocol and the incentives of the token. There might be one in the future. You could imagine there being one, but as it's currently set out, there isn't one. Right? There's this token. There's a protocol that earns fees, and the two are totally unrelated. And that's true of the vast majority of different projects with different protocols. And the reason I think this is weird is because I think this is a solved problem. What do I mean it's a solved problem? I think there's a very simple model for large collaborations of people who need to invest resources, time, money, capital, whatever, in order to get a large project to work early on. And they do so at risk. And they also need to be able to have a mechanism to govern the system that they're working on, and to have shared incentives and a way to coordinate. And this solved problem was solved in the form of what you mentioned earlier, which is basically having like a stake, or in the old way of speaking about it, equity in a system. And there's a pretty simple way of how you analyze a system in which the tokens both provide you with risks and incentives and governance, but also potentially upside, and that is what's known as discounted cash flow, which is an analysis that you can do of what are the potential returns from the system's revenue that could be accrued by this asset. And so it's not that complicated a problem. And when we were developing the way the economic system and the incentive system, and particularly how the token would drive the incentives around collaboration in the Sovryn ecosystem, we basically just copied that model because it's a model which has existed for hundreds of years and works. And I think that's the advantage of coming from maybe a Bitcoin first perspective on the world, which is I think Bitcoin started almost one of the motivations for Bitcoin, I think, was a return to simplicity, right? Let's have in 2008, the world economy almost died because of huge levels of complexity in games that were being played, not just by the banks, but by the central banks who were creating the fiat, which itself, the very meaning of fiat is by decree, right? It's like people just decide that how much money there's going to be tomorrow and how much money there's going to be the day after. And so there was this desire to have a return to simplicity, because a return to simplicity is a return to something which can be rationally analyzed and a return to something which is reliable. And so I think tokenomics can be, which is also kind of a silly term, right? The incentive system structured around the token can be structured with that same idea of simplicity in place. And I think if we do that, we can unleash a huge amount of creativity and value, because one of the problems that I see right now in the Lightning Network and in the Bitcoin ecosystem, open source, like things like RGB, is it's hard for teams to put together the kind of resources that are required for multi-year concerted effort of a very large number of people who are dedicated to a project. And on the other hand, everything that is being done around Bitcoin is being done by the, companies which are, not governed in a decentralized way and are funded by all of these VCs in sort of the most traditional way. And so I feel like we're missing a very, very big potential opportunity to use this concept of decentralized consensus to create an economy around Bitcoin that is built on the same principles that Bitcoin is built on.
Maybe I'm missing something, but why not just use Bitcoin?
So you can't just use Bitcoin So I'm going to put aside Sovryn now for a second, right? But let's talk about Trezor, right? So Trezor has created a huge amount of value for the Bitcoin ecosystem. And Trezor has a very strong incentive to do that, because there's a clear way for Trezor to incentivize to be incentivized to do this, right? Every time you sell a Trezor, you make some money. Now, there have also been efforts to create hardware wallets where everything is open source, right? The hardware is open source, the firmware is open source, etc., etc. And they haven't taken off in the same way that Trezor has. And you could basically know from the get-go that they wouldn't, right? Even if people could very, very easily order all of the things that they need to on Amazon in order to put together this, and they could download the firmware, they still wouldn't do it. There is a huge amount of sort of convenience and advantage to being able to do it through Trezor. And also, there's no one promoting the 100% open source hardware wallet, right? So what if we could compensate or incentivize the team that was building the 100% everything open source, no centralized provider hardware wallet with Bitcoin, right? Well, I mean, it's an idea, but how would you actually go about doing it, right? Who would be providing that Bitcoin? Under what circumstances? How would the Bitcoin be used to govern whatever collective was doing this? I don't think that there's really a way of doing that in the same way that, Amazon isn't governed by people with dollars. Amazon is governed by people who have Amazon shares.
So, yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. Maybe my view of Bitcoin is maybe what Bitcoin will be and not necessarily what it's capable of right now. And so the layer twos and so on, they would all feed into that, but I don't necessarily see the token being the thing, perhaps more of a labeling system or something along those lines. But I think maybe Pavol would have something to say about the open source wallet as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would just react on the open source hardware side of things. I think we got really lucky because we recognized there is this need for hardware wallet in space, and we also had this first movers advantage. So it was somehow easier for us to come up with open source hardware wallet. And the others who wanted to create open source hardware wallet, they didn't have this first mover advantage. They didn't have this track record. They could really show to others that they are honest or they are skilled. Because if you are doing things that are open source, that doesn't really necessarily mean it's more it is of better quality than the others, but it means that it can become better quality software if you are able to attract the community around you that will provide you feedback and maybe useful hints. So this was definitely very useful for us, and that we were able to attract such community. And I totally recognize it's getting harder in the space to come up with fully open source solution, especially because there is just so much to choose from, and also there are a lot of projects that present themselves as open source, but actually they are not open source. So even this term has somehow deteriorated through time, and it requires a lot of scrutiny on the user side of things to understand which project is now fully auditable and not. And frankly, we have reached the point where we have hit mainstream, or maybe not mainstream, but still the Bitcoin bubble is much bigger than it used to be, and these people don't have enough time and knowledge to perform all of this scrutiny. So the narratives are getting more complicated.
Yeah, 100%. So I think maybe we should make some time for if there are people who would like to ask questions. But before we get to questions, I'd like to take the conversation in a slightly different direction and talk about the future, right? And I'm particularly curious about the future of personal data and the future of the internet in a world in which millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, have access to hardware keys. Like, I think this potentially goes quite far beyond just storing Bitcoin or just storing crypto, and could change the architecture of how people manage their personal data. And I'm wondering if that is a direction that you think of at Trezor, and sort of what, if so, what do you imagine happening?
Yeah, good question. We were going back and forth about the idea of Trezor becoming the universal cryptographic token, which can be used for everything, basically, not only holding your own keys to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but also to use that for encrypting your files. But in the end, we realized we are still a relatively small company, and we need to have laser focus on the things that we are currently bringing significant value in. So I mean, there are a lot of other companies that are trying to solve the problem of encrypting private data in a way that you are the only one who owns the key. Same goes with passwords, and I'm not saying we are not doing that, but there is just so much things to do for a company of our size. I mean, there was Taproot. Now we are talking about Lightning. We are investing a lot of our stuff in investigating CoinJoin and other solutions that we can bring to Trezor users. So in that scheme of things, that would seem like a defocus right now. But still, our mission, like I said earlier, we like to empower people to become self-sovereign, and the topic of owning your own private data is certainly well aligned with that mission, but we have to postpone that. That said, there are already some pretty good projects in that area. For example, the Bitwarden password manager is nice tool. There are solutions to encrypt your either a folder on your hard drive, or you can encrypt the whole disk. And these are all solutions we can integrate into as a universal cryptographic token, but we decide not to do it right at the moment because we still do think that our main thing where we can provide significant value is Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very excited to be able to, buy a Trezor and start using it as a just to protect other passwords and things. I wonder, would it be possible to make it easier for an ecosystem of developers to grow out and build out around Trezor so that you guys could continue your focus, but maybe if there was like an SDK or a set of tools so that other developers could start building more of an ecosystem around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense, and it's already happening. I mean, there is Roman Zaide who created a Trezor agent, which is a small program that communicates with Trezor and is able to ask it for public keys. And then he used that application of his to integrate into GPG and SSH. So you could use keys generated in Trezor device to remotely log in to your server using SSH, or to use GPG for encryption. Even later, OpenSSH added FIDO2 support directly into their stack, and Trezor can talk FIDO2, so you can use Trezor with SSH as well. There are guides for that, but still this is like more for advanced or power users. It's not like polished for everybody, but it's totally usable right now, and there are people using it, including me. Also, when it comes to file encryption, you can use the project called Go CryptFS. It's written in Go, and it also really well integrates with FIDO2 tokens, including Trezor. So you can have an encrypted folder that is backed by a key stored in a Trezor device. But again, it's not super polished. It doesn't have a graphics user interface. You need to type commands on the command line in order to create this folder. So there is definitely a lot of things happening in that front, but it's not aimed for regular users that are not tech savvy, and we try to bring Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to these users right now, but this will follow later, surely.
Awesome.
All right, I think we can open it for a question or two, Yago, because I think we have a hard stop today in about 20 minutes or so. So, Cordy Joss, you've been waiting. Go ahead and ask your question. I believe Orange Pilled. Let you up on this stage as well. Cody Joss, you just need to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks again for doing this. I just wanted a question. It kind of came up. I think, Anthony, you were saying something and then dropped off, but you were saying something to the effect that you're coming into this and commenting in a very negative way towards DeFi. Then you cut off, and I kind of was hoping you'd expand upon that. And I say that with the preface that I appreciate that that sort of critical approach to this space that's been insane, to put it mildly, and like the critical feedback. And I also like that Yago comes on and, in my opinion, does one of the best jobs of articulating why his vision, right or wrong, his vision with Sovryn kind of goes against those things. But do you remember when you came on and said, you were coming at this space negative? Yeah. Okay. If you could just talk a little bit more about that, and again, I welcome it. Thank you.
So I actually kind of went back to my point, and when I was saying that we're coming across really and not anti-Web3, we're just kind of getting a lot of hate. Well, I don't know how to put it without sounding horrible. But my point really is that it's very, very early, and that's right at the beginning. I was talking about how you need that base layer of security, and if you're talking about finance, talking about decentralized finance, and not everyone has access to security that they can roll their own, that they know is going to be secure while they're using it, and for the long term while they're staking on it, then you don't really have DeFi. So my vision is that DeFi is coming. I don't believe that it's here in a very complete structure just yet. And I feel like if it's going to happen, it will happen on Bitcoin. So something like Sovryn might be that. And Sovryn, I suppose, will have a more secure base layer, but still, if you're not working with your own seed that you know is 100% unique, then there's no point in even thinking about any of these tokens or any of these new projects. So I think that was where I was going with that back then.
Okay, thank you very much. And then just a follow-up question, Yago, just real quick. I know there's been development of the hardware integration to the Sovryn. It's been fluid. I've experimented a bit. It's been a little difficult because it's been through MetaMask then to the hardware wallet for authenticating the transactions. But is there, from your point of view, going to be any more development to make the direct use of the hardware wallet more common with that? Or just some thoughts on that, and feel free to be as short or as long as you want. Thank you again, guys. I appreciate y'all doing this.
Sure. Yeah, so, we are trying to encourage, and we are trying to figure out ways of doing this with the user interface to encourage people to understand that by default, they should be using a hardware wallet, or at minimum. So I think, right now the best way to use the system is with a hardware wallet. There are ways that we could envision having a hardware wallet potentially integrated with something like Casa wallet so that you can get both hardware and multi-sig. But that would require an integration more directly with Casa because there's no easy standard for that. So right now, the way I use Sovryn is directly with the Trezor, actually. And I'd encourage everyone to do the same. Web3 wallets like MetaMask have pretty significant potential risks. And those include the actual risks of using the system, but also the way that the system is designed. It doesn't really lead the user down a path of creating security in terms of the way they create their seed phrase and store their seed phrase, and there's lots of things that can go wrong. And so it was for that reason that we wanted to make sure that using Sovryn with a hardware wallet would kind of be the first-class citizen way of doing it, and then the other things are there because not everyone has a hardware wallet. And so, we still wanted the system to be accessible to other people as well.
Okay, much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Orange Will. Cordy, I think you are here as a speaker. If you can ask your question, then shoot. Otherwise, I see.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's definitely about the post that Yago made about, I think it was like 24 hours ago. It was about the metaverse and not being on Ethereum or being on chain. And, RSK has the best security. You guys have reached over, RSK has, I think, over like 60% hash rate of Bitcoin on RSK. So that's pretty good. And the thing about the metaverse is I'm actually an early investor in, NFTs. And there's an article that I actually wrote about like 2 years ago. and I played Axie Infinity. And it's this popular blockchain game right now. And in Axie Infinity, I actually made money playing a game. In 5 hours, I made enough money to like buy a quesadilla and French fries in Brooklyn. And that was great to me. I was like, this is amazing. But that was on Ethereum. And the thing about that is I see a lot of earning opportunities for people overseas with blockchain games and the metaverse. There's a lot of ways that they could start the business. Like this project I'm invested in on Ethereum, I'm able to start business with like $2,000 and lend out my NFT to other gamers all over the world, and they're able to make $25, $30, $50 a day. Some are able to make $100 a day based on how good they are. And I'm like, oh wow, this is a way for people all over the world to actually build their own self-sufficient economies. And I feel like because the metaverse is a way to actually get things done quicker, and we are still in the traditional world, but the metaverse is a new world where there's more opportunities for everyone to actually take advantage. And I believe it's going to be the best thing on RSK because of blockchain, Bitcoin security as well. So the question I have is, what are the plans for the metaverse with RSK? Because right now there's I follow Ethereum projects. I've been following them a lot, and I've been following RSK since 2018. A lot of digital land projects are using Polygon. Are there any plans for Polygon to be run on RSK as well?
Yeah, so I don't think. All right, so a few things. First of all, thanks very much, and I think it is very cool to have more and more economic activity and economic options in a digital space, which is borderless and anyone can access. I do think that the metaverse is an incredible opportunity, and the primary innovation, as I see it, of Bitcoin, is the creation of internet native property rights. Basically that. And nowhere are internet native property rights more important than in the digital realm and in digital worlds that, the metaverse basically is a term for. So the question is, how do we get there? And I think the way we should get there is by thinking about what blockchains can do well. I think what blockchains can do well is they can represent and manage property rights, right? All of the rest of the stuff, the computation, the games, the whatever, doesn't actually and probably shouldn't be on a blockchain. And so how can we build out the level of scale for Sovryn and for Rootstock to be able to manage and provide, property rights across multiple different game universes and multiple different types of transactional activity, and everything from trading to people in El Salvador paying for groceries with Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, right? That's potentially millions and millions and millions of transactions. And the only way that you do that is through continuing to scale in layers, right? So we've got Bitcoin, the base layer, which is the ultimate security, the ultimate court, the ultimate settlement layer for all of this. Then you have a layer on top, which is Rootstock, which ideally will never be like Ethereum, will never have a lot of activity on it, but instead all of the activity, all of the computation will be done on rollups, probably zero knowledge proof rollups, and will be integrated with Lightning Network so that the majority of transactional activity is occurring through Lightning Network. And so basically all of the computation and vast majority of the transactional activity is actually not occurring, not on Rootstock and certainly not on Bitcoin main chain. And if you do that, I think you can effectively reach infinite scalability. And you can do it, and if you can't, well, you can also always spin up additional instances of sort of like Rootstock sidechains. And so for that reason, I don't think you need to use the sort of like proof of stake type sidechain that Polygon represents. I think you can ultimately have everything settled down to Bitcoin proof of work and have all of the payments for all of that provided to Bitcoin miners to increase the security budget of Bitcoin and keep Bitcoin highly secure even long after the subsidy is gone. And I think we will probably build the entire world in that way because Bitcoin remains the center of gravity for the entire space and also the single most reliable and secure layer. And when you're building for the long term, you want to build on, something that is basically not going to change very much in 10 and 20 years.
Got it.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. Abundance.
Hello. Thank you for doing this session. I have a quick question. This is regarding one of the comments on Web3 and the space, how it is being taken over by the big VCs, like Andreessen, how they have invested huge sums of money and they already have billions of dollars planned for Web3 companies. So the whole concept of decentralization, where did it exist in the future when majority of this Web3 is going to be handled by a few big VCs? So I would like to hear your comments on that. How will decentralization really work in that environment?
I would always say that decentralization is the goal here. When it comes to Web3, Web3 is not in the hands of VCs. Web3 is just a term that's being applied to something that's already existed for many years now, and it's being marketed. And that's why you're seeing seeing so much about Web3 tied up with these with A16Z and the rest, is because it's being, a lot of money is being put behind that particular keyword for you to go and think that this is something that you should buy because it's got Web3 tagged on there. There's a whole load of things that don't call themselves Web3, but they are Web3. Bitcoin is in a way Web3 as well. I don't know why this term is getting so much attention, apart from the fact that so much money is being put into it. And I think the only way to keep it out of the hands of VCs is to work on or invest in decentralized projects, of which there are very few. So that's just my opinion there.
So I have a pretty diametrically opposed opinion, even though we probably agree. I think we just get there from different directions. So I would say that decentralization is not the goal, that decentralization is a tool, and that the goal is creating rules without rulers. In other words, it's creating systems where there's no boss, and it's very difficult for any individual or group of individuals to take control over the system. Now that is an architectural problem. It's a design problem. And if you construct the system correctly with the right incentives, it doesn't matter. In fact, it can be maybe beneficial if VCs get involved. And a very good example of this is Bitcoin, right? So we have huge amounts of money being invested in Bitcoin. We have very, very large companies like MicroStrategy buying up large amounts of Bitcoin. We have Galaxy Digital and NYDIG. We have very large mining companies like Marathon. And we have players like Coinbase and, the Bitmain, right? And in theory, this should have allowed them to become a cartel that together control Bitcoin. But in practice, we had a test of this a few years ago with the block size wars, and Bitmain and the large exchanges tried to introduce changes to Bitcoin that a large percentage of the Bitcoin users didn't want, and they failed. So I think the fact that these large players are involved, I think the fact that MicroStrategy is involved, the fact that NYDIG is involved, these, Van Eck and Fidelity are all involved. I think these are good things in terms of being able to fund the innovation and grow the network effects of Bitcoin. And the reason that they're good things is because Bitcoin was well designed in terms of its game theory and its incentives, so it didn't matter that VCs were getting involved. So I think of VCs getting involved as more of a symptom than the problem itself. And if systems are well designed, then actually it could be to the benefit to get large numbers of deep-pocketed players involved. I think that the real problem is that a lot of systems are just very, very poorly designed. And quite frequently, the poorly designed systems are also the ones which attract VCs. Not always, but frequently.
I agree with your example of Bitcoin, but VCs and big players got involved after Bitcoin was already out there. The architecture, the design was already very decentralized. But now in the current situation, the VCs are the ones who are funding these companies who are building those architectures. So they have a huge say how they are going to set up those architectures, which won't be fully decentralized, which means these architectures would, like, so for example, OpenSea is one of the biggest player, $9 billion valuation there, and through 2 rounds of funding by Andreessen Horowitz VC. So they would have a say because they are the biggest investor there. They're not jumping into the game after OpenSea's architecture is already fully decentralized. There is a huge base of users there. They are getting involved in the very beginning, and that kind of makes me feel that the game would get rigged against the common guy, you know. So
Yeah,
that's where.
I think you're right. I think that's true. And I think teams that are committed to the idea of building out self-sovereign systems, right? Rules without rulers, right? Building out basically a world in the vision, in the mold of Bitcoin, have to be very, very careful about how they do it. You know, all of us, not all of us, but a lot of us on the call here now, and a lot of people who are speaking, Trezor, for example, they were around in 2016, 2017. Trezor could have easily done a huge ICO and chose not to, right? I was in a similar situation. I had a company, we were doing very well. We were using Bitcoin to do cross-border transactions. Could have easily done an ICO and raised a huge amount of money. We didn't, I think, because we didn't think it was honest or incentive compatible. We didn't think it would have integrity. With Sovryn started getting built out without any funding. And then when it took, some investment, I and some other Bitcoiners put in some Bitcoin, put our skin in the game because we wanted to see it develop. And Sovryn still hasn't taken any sort of VC funding. Now, it may do so in the future, right? Maybe the VCs do invest in Sovryn in the future. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think will be very context dependent, but I think it's really a question of is the system being built with a clear sense of its goals and integrity around those goals? Because you're right that if the system is attracting VC money, which is very, very interested in capturing rents, right, and possibly dumping on retail from its earliest days, and it doesn't have very much chance of being built along different lines. And so maybe that's where Anthony and I come to agreement.
And I think with that agreement, we can wrap it up for today. Maybe before we do this, Trezor team, if you'd like to let us know about your future upcoming appearances or any new updates that maybe you'd like to share with the Sovryn team, any hot, I don't know, maybe there's a new wallet coming up. And also would like to share that Yago is going to be on Coindex TV in about 25 minutes to speak about new Walmart coin. So you're more than welcome to join us there as well. So Pavol, any exciting news, or Anthony?
I have nothing special to share just yet. We should be slated for a release soon, which I can probably...
Yeah, it seems like we lost Anthony again.
Yeah, we lost Anthony again. All right. Okay, so maybe just tell us, guys, where can we follow you for those who don't know yet? And I don't know.
Yeah, we got the Trezor account as a co-host here, so that's probably the best space to follow Trezor around. And just for me personally, I am experimenting a bit with Twitter Spaces. It's called Fiat Free, like a Twitter Space that I'm holding like once or twice a month, and it's about living without fiat, just on Bitcoin, and interviews with people that are from economies where the fiat is collapsing, like Lebanon, Turkey, Argentina, and such. So follow me and Trezor. Check out the next Twitter Space session, probably with someone from Turkey. And yeah, you can get our updates on our blog and our newsletter.
That sounds super cool. Super
Yeah.
cool.
I'll definitely join.
Cool.
Thank you very much for invitation. It was great to talk with you guys, and I hope to see you somewhere in person when it will be finally possible.
Bitcoin Miami.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for joining, guys.
Bye bye. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.